Philbin. I'm the director of the Michigan chapter of the Sierra Club. And welcome to Farming Our Future, the Forces and Faces of 21st Century Agriculture. This is an exciting culmination of about a year's worth of work on the group on the part of the Less is More Coalition. Sierra Club is a member, as well as about a dozen other groups and farmers and individuals who are concerned about the way the subsidies in this state are distributed to favor the practices of polluting factory farms over sustainable livestock operations. So we've been working over the last 3 years to educate the public, work with agencies and farmers to try to shift the subsidies to support more sustainable agriculture. And we did release a report in 2013, which the link is up there on the screen. And we're working to try to bring the support that taxpayer dollars go more in line with what consumers seem to want these days. There's the hottest trend in food buying is buying at farmers markets and food co-ops and CSAs. People want sources for local, healthy, sustainable, and humanely raised food. So why are we here today? In the course of our work, we were having conversations amongst the groups that are part of Less is More Coalition, and it seemed like a good time to take stock in where we are right now, where we are with the state of affairs in agriculture. If you look in the headlines today, you see food and farming all the time. There's issues all around the country. We have ag-gag laws that are being proposed, right to farm amendments to the constitutions of states like Missouri, which I'm sure Joe Maxwell might touch on later. Here in Michigan, just 6 months ago, there was about 500,000 people who couldn't drink their water for 2 days last summer because algae growth in Lake Erie that was fueled in part by phosphorus runoff from industrial agriculture made the water undrinkable. So it's in the headlines, and you can't seem to get away from it. And it begs the question, how do we get to the point today where how we grow our food actually can endanger our health rather than promote it? So we thought we'd get a bunch of knowledgeable people in the room together. So we have consumers, researchers, farmers, advocates from various groups around the country here today to talk about where we are right now and how can we move forward to a more positive future. The goal is to offer you the chance to learn more, network with people, strategize about ways we can build on where we're at and move in a better direction. And hopefully you'll come away today with a better understanding of a role that you could play to help us all move forward. I'm going to quickly thank our sponsors. We had some generous contributions from these folks here: Irwin Andrew Porter Foundation, the Humane Society of the United States, University of Michigan, Michigan Farmers Union Foundation, Socially Responsible Agricultural Project, Tyler Creek Golf Course, the Greater Grand Rapids Food Systems Council, Michigan State University, and Sierra Club Michigan chapter. I also want to acknowledge the people that actually did all the hard work over the last year. So I want to, if you're in the audience, stand up when I call your name. This is our steering committee for the Less is More Coalition. Catherine Badgley from University of Michigan, Wendy Banka from the Michigan Small Farm Council, Jill Fritz from the Humane Society of the United States. I think she might be out in the hallway. Lena Kauchek from Food and Water Watch, Sandy Nordmark, who is a longtime farmer and rabble-rouser and a member of the Michigan Small Farm Council, and Cynthia Price from the Greater Grand Rapids Food System Council. So can we all give them a round of applause? It's really, really hard on us. Catherine Badgley, who is an ecologist, paleontologist, and organic farmer, who also happens to be the associate professor in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Michigan. Her research concerns the history of life and the challenges facing sustainable food systems. So please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you very much, Gail. And I think we should all acknowledge Gail, who was the sort of uber leader of the steering committee, and has done a huge amount for the Less Equals More Coalition and for making this conference possible. I'm part of a group of faculty at the University of Michigan that have been trying very hard over the last 10 years to raise the profile of food, agriculture, and all the challenges surrounding a sustainable food system with some success. And part of that success has been building coalitions and bridges with folks from other universities, and the people in the Sustainable Food System program here have been a tremendous support and help for us, both in providing insights and supporting our endeavors. And so we all feel as though we're in this together. And I'm very, very pleased always when I come up to the MSU campus to be part of an event here. Also, as far as the conference is concerned, just to build on what Gail has said, in addition to looking at the forces that have brought us to this point, we're very much looking forward as well, and the forces that are in play that have the potential to move us toward a much more sustainable food system than what we have right now. Because I'm sure most of you are here because you sense that much about the food system is in flux right now, and that makes this a very exciting time to be interested in this topic. So to get us all thinking about the issues that are involved, I'm very happy to welcome our keynote speaker, Joe Maxwell, who is doing the gracious job of serving at very short notice in place of Tim Gibbons. Joe Maxwell is also from Missouri. He raises pigs there as a fourth-generation farmer. He's Vice President of Outreach and Engagement for the Humane Society of the United States. He's been a Missouri State Representative and Lieutenant Governor of Missouri. So we see a very interesting confluence of farming, politics, concern for animal welfare, and it's this interesting set of new kind of alliances and perspectives that is part of what makes the present moment so exciting. So with that, I'd like to welcome Joe Maxwell.
Thank you very much. Tim called me yesterday morning, Tim Gibbons, and has contracted some kind of bug that's going around, I suppose, in his neck of the woods. He wants me to express how sorry he is that he can't be here. He and I were looking very much forward to being together. We're both from Missouri, but we both travel and work, and sometimes we don't even get to see each other very much, so we're both disappointed that we can't be here together to kind of talk about our experiences, both nationally and also as it relates to the state of Missouri. I'm a member of MRCC, Missouri Rural Crisis Center. My mom's a member, our family farm's a member, and we're very proud of the work that they do there. They are part of a coalition, not unlike the one that I commend Gail for continuing to move forward with our Less Equals More or Less is More coalition here in Michigan. In Missouri, we call it Missouri's Food for America. And so it's a similar coalition, and we join together to help educate individuals and then to take action on what we believe is the right direction for our food system within our state and then nationally. I'm going to hit on a couple of points. I'm going to begin a little bit by telling you about the Humane Society of the United States. Oftentimes, as a farmer and someone that travels this country and works, I get asked a lot of questions about what in the world is a farmer doing with an animal welfare organization, and how does that play a part? Aren't they about puppies and kittens? So I wanted to spell that right up front a little bit about the Humane Society of the United States. We have Jill Fritz is working, as was said. She's outside. She lives here. We have thousands of members in Michigan. We have a state council. That's kind of like our state board, if you will, of citizens of Michigan. And Jill is our state director and runs that operation. The other thing to know about the Humane Society of the United States is it's 60 years old. And one of the reasons that it was organized was to begin to think about all animals, not just the companion animals. And one of the first action steps it took was to help usher in the Humane Slaughter Act in Washington, D.C. So a lot of folks in agriculture say, well, why are they getting involved now in agriculture? Well, the Humane Society was actually formed looking towards farmed animals and the slaughter of those and the care for those animals. Thus, the logo demonstrates all animals across the country. I just got back Friday night late from Brussels. And I'm working on TTIP with the Humane Society International, which is the sister organization of the Humane Society of the United States. We operate in about 12 other countries working on sustainable agriculture. And so we have a broad agenda as it works with family farmers, whether that's in Mexico, or whether that's in South Africa, or India, or Vietnam. We are working to ensure that this industrialized plague that we've put onto the world, this industrialized agriculture model, doesn't continue to spread. Many of these companies today are multinational. They were U.S. based. Mr. Tyson began the thought of what I call, and my good friend Fred Stokes with the Organization for Competitive Markets calls chickenization of agriculture. And we now see that spread around the country. The HSUS is about 11 million constituents and consumers around the country, farmers to vegan outreach coordinators. We cover the breadth of animal welfare in the U.S., and I'm proud to be. This is Kevin Fulton. He's on our Agricultural Council in Nebraska. He's the chairman of that Agriculture Council. He's an organic cattleman there. I think he has 2,800 acres in Litchfield, Nebraska, a good friend of ours. We have a new Ag Council here in Michigan. If you go to our table during the lunch break, you'll get to, we got some information about those folks there, and we're proud to have farmers joining HSUS here in Michigan. HSUS's statement on farm animals and eating with a conscience: we seek to ensure that animal production systems are humane, sustainable, and environmentally sensitive. So it's no wonder we're proud to join with the Sierra Club and the other 10 or 11 organizations here. The Farmers Union, I'm a member of the Farmers Union in Missouri. My brother's a former board member of the National Farmers Union, so we're proud to be part of that kind of thinking. HSUS supports those farmers and ranchers who give proper care to their animals and act in accordance with basic ethic of compassion to sentient creatures under their control and practice, and promote humane and environmentally sustainable agriculture. I say, we support, no different than I think you in this room, right? The good stewards of the land and the animals. Those that understand stewardship, those that understand animal husbandry and not just meat science. I like to tell people, I am a pig farmer. I am not a pork producer. I'm a cattleman. I'm not a beef producer. When we began to think the way that it's just a pork chop, then we begin to abuse everything in that system, whether that's our land or the animal or our neighbor. I'm proud to be part of the Humane Society of the United States and help build this kind of thinking and coalition building. Too long we've had Big Ag use diversionary political tactics to separate us, those of us in this room that come here either from an environmental interest, a family farm interest, a rural interest, or urban agriculture interest, animal welfare interest. We've allowed them to make one of us the bad guy or gal and focus our attention on those horrible Sierra Club or those animal rights people or cute little organic farmers. Aren't they cute, but they can't feed the world kind of people? And by doing that, we've created factories, not farms. We have allowed that to happen in our society. We voters, we consumers, we eaters have allowed farms to turn into factories across this country. I want to commend Michigan. It's an honor to be here. You're the first state in the country whose legislature stepped up to the plate and banned some of the most extreme, inhumane agricultural practices as it relates to animals. And you should be proud. You're a state with a great heritage in agriculture, traditional family farm agriculture. I visited with Wendy. We're going to get together and learn more about the Small Farms Coalition group here, and proud to be here today with her. You have a heritage in Michigan for that and have stepped up to the plate in the past. So I want to thank you, and it's an honor to be in Michigan. Some of my comments are directed more towards those other states or our federal government who have not taken action. And it's also my understanding recently the administration here in Michigan is maybe turning in a different direction, only further concentrating and consolidating agriculture and harming and abusing the land, the animal, the farmer, and the rural economy. How did we get here? This is a factory. This is rows of, I laugh because it's that sad, rows of sows, mama pigs, in their gestation crates. They never get to turn around. They take one step. The best they get is about a step to half a step forward and backwards. They lie down and they stand up. That's their life. A few days prior to giving birth to their piglets, they're moved to a farrowing crate. Now here's the thing that drives me insane. We've been working hard to end gestation crates around the country. The governor of New Jersey vetoed a ban on gestation crates because he got advice from the governor from Iowa. The governor from Iowa told him that he was a farm boy. This is in the Des Moines Register. I can provide the actual quotes, but it goes something like this. He's a farm boy, grew up on the farm, and that by golly, you needed those gestation crates to protect those piglets from being crushed. Gestation crate. Let's see. No, not farrowing. She's not giving birth. There aren't any pigs in those crates. It's just mamas. I would suggest to Governor Christie he quit listening to the advice of the Iowa governor. They just had a big conference there. Was that Saturday, I think? I don't know. My days are kind of mixed up. I apologize. But where they brought in all of the think tank people to talk about industrialized agriculture and to assure that the Republican candidates were properly vetted. I'm sure the governor, I meant to call him. I hope he didn't embarrass himself again and tell him that there's piglets in these things, but oh well. 290 million. Oddly enough, do you know each of us needs one hen, laying hen? About 300 million U.S. citizens, we have 290 million laying hens. We each get a hen. This is your hen. I'm sure you're proud to eat your scrambled eggs in the morning. It was already mentioned about citizens in this great state not even being able to drink their drinking water because of the pollution caused by overconcentration of animals and the overuse of petroleum or chemically based fertilizers and the runoff. What we've seen in this industrialized ag model that began in the 60s is we've got more animals, fewer farmers, more abuse, and less husbandry on the farm. Here's how many more animals. Oddly enough, U.S. consumption for meat has been going down. We're down about 12 to 15% over the last 3 to 4 years. But the number of animals are increasing. Mother Jones had an article a few months ago, the magazine Mother Jones, it asked the question, are we becoming, is the U.S. becoming the factory farm for China? I tell you, yes, we are. 40% of the arable land of China is polluted. And their 5-year food plan to feed their population was to buy Smithfield, the largest pork producer in the world. 25% of the pork chops are controlled by Smithfield. It's now owned by China, and they're planning on expanding in my state more CAFOs so they can pollute my streams, my air, to feed their country. I would love to help them learn how to feed their country and not pollute up their own rivers and pollute up their own land, and then we wouldn't have to be polluting up mine. Not that every citizen in this world doesn't deserve to have quality, healthy, safe food. But the way we go about it has to make sense for all the citizens of this world. This is insanity. We estimate, we'd love to get more detail on this, but roughly HSUS believes we've got about 2 billion more animals than is sustainable. We're going to try to get that data but just by browsing through. You know, we could reduce the number of farmed animals in the U.S. by about 2 billion if we just quit throwing them away. 23% of the animal products in this country are thrown away. You want to do nothing else, buy what you need. The UN did a report and showed in the U.S. it's a consumer problem, not an institutional problem. You in this room could make a difference by 2 billion animals. You could eat the same amount. Being a farm boy, sometimes I talk about eating less meat. You know, it's killing us. It's not for today's conversation, but it's the truth. You know, I didn't grow up with a 16-ounce piece of meat sitting in the center of my plate and a 2-pound baked potato loaded with sour cream and cheese on it, right? No, Mama said that'll kill you. You got to eat your vegetables and your fruits, boy. We throw it away. Fewer farmers. That's what industrialized ag has given us. Fewer farmers. I've got several slides on this. Being a farm boy, this disturbs me the most. This is the loss in the country since about the time that I began farming. I paid my first taxes as a farmer in 1978 after a short stint in the military. I stayed in. I was in the reserve component, but I came back to the farm. So I kind of use 1980, 1978. You'll see those numbers just because this is what's happened in my lifetime. That makes it real for me every day when I get up. I look at these numbers so that I can get the motivation to know why I want to come out and convince you that you're the solution. 41% of the cattlemen in this country have gone broke and driven off the land since I began farming. 91% of the hog farmers. 81% of our dairies, 32% of our sheep. Fewer farmers, more animals, more abuse, less husbandry. That's what the industrialized ag model has given us. And poopy food. It's killing you. That was a nice word, right? I got to be a little careful every now and then. This is an example, just one example. Food and Water Watch is one of the sponsors and partners, and I commend them. This comes out of their report. If you don't have their report, it was really a compilation of great reports and studies over about a 40-year period of time, and I can provide that, but I'm sure they can provide that to you. But this slide comes from them. This was a study in Iowa. So from 1982 to 2007, you can see the numbers. 40,000 fewer hog farmers. And see, they just concentrated them. USDA put out a report at this time, and it said it's not that we're actually raising at this time more animals. It's just who and how they're being raised. These animals are coming off the land. They're no longer scattered across Iowa. I rode across Iowa with Wayne Pacelli here a year ago. And he was just surprised. We actually drove across Nebraska, Iowa, and into Indiana. So I took him across farm country. I love Missouri, but I think that's really a great beltway to see what's happened. There's no animals on the land anymore. We are corn and soybeans. So we can feed more animals to pollute up more of our drinking water, to contaminate our air, drive down our property values in the rural area. 2 years ago, July 25th, Wisconsin, greatest, best cheese in the world. I was in Edam, Netherlands, for the Edam cheese, and I was in Belgium, and they've got great cheese, but nothing compares to good Wisconsin cheese. And I just torqued off every Michigan dairyman here maybe, but hadn't thought all the way through that statement now that I think about it. I mean, this This headline says it all. This is in the Wisconsin State Farmer. This is not some liberal rag or animal rights organization or environmentalist organization. This is just the truthfulness. The Wild West as farmers are being driven out of business and mega dairies are being put in their place. Rural economies will be devastated, no different than in Iowa and Missouri when we saw the hogs come in or the chickens come in. Feed stores go broke. Hardware stores go broke. This was Lake Erie. This was the Akron Beacon. You can see that. And we know that after this, 100 people in Toledo became ill, right, from drinking of their water in America. We're not in, we work hard every day in this country to provide potable water around the world. Just look at the budgets, and I'm proud of the work that many organizations, NGOs do in the support of the federal government to do that. But yet when it comes to the United States, our government will not defend our drinking water. Something, gosh darn, is wrong in America. Who would have thought a decade ago that your drinking water could kill you? Des Moines, Iowa. The waterworks is having to sue. $4 million they spent on capital investment, almost $4 million capital investment to clean the hog manure and other nutrients out of their drinking water, and going to spend $1 million more a year. Their taxpayers are to clean the hog manure and the nutrients out of their drinking water so it's safe for them to drink. And the governor of Iowa wants to build more hog factories, more laying hens. It's insanity. Abuse in the marketplace. If you want to be a traditional independent farmer, it's extremely challenging today because there's no place to process and slaughter your animals. Industrialized ag has vertically integrated the system, bought up the pork plants, bought up the chicken plants, bought up most of the beef plants now, and they control that market, driving farmers off the land through manipulation and predatory practices in the market. And our government does nothing. Since I began farming, there are 1 million fewer farmers in the United States. This is a central reason for that. These big subsidies don't go to the family farmers. They go to the largest industrialized ag interest in the world. Our government sits here, your government in your state, our Washington, D.C., and Missouri, and Iowa, and Kansas, and Nebraska, and Indiana, and Ohio, and Texas. And it's not even U.S. companies that we're protecting. The largest pork producer and pig producer in the U.S. is a Chinese firm called Smithfield. The largest beef is Brazilian. The largest poultry, Brazilian. So when they grow and they profit in our country, that profits don't stay here. The wealth is extracted from our country, from your state, from rural economies, and transplanted thousands of miles away in another country. They claim it's economic development. They'll show those reports, and what they do is they take the construction value. They'll say, we're going to spend this much money. That is a short-term economic analysis of what the future will look like for that rural community and for that state. Study after study says that our subsidies have built the greatest companies, vertically integrated businesses in the world, and it's sucking all our profits, and we're giving them more tax money to continue to do it. That's insanity. Absolute insanity. The list goes on and on. Contracts, chicken farmers. Craig Watts, Google that, look at his YouTube stuff out there that was released. If you want to see the story of the chicken farmers. Stuck and hung in a system almost that equivalent of serfdom. Borrowing and having borrowed millions of dollars on behalf of the largest corporations in the world. And they claim, well, they don't have to contract with us. There's no one else. This country has been carved up in huge regions by multinational corporations, and there may be more than one in the United States, but not in that region. And economics of shipping prevent that farmer from even being able to access a different company with a different contract. They become the tenant farmer on their own land, trapped by debt. The environmental costs are externalized. Why isn't the farmers, those multinational corporations, those large factory farms, having to pay to clean up the manure out of the river so citizens in Des Moines don't have to pay it? Why is that cost externalized onto the taxpayers? Why are our subsidies, your tax money, going into their pockets? They say it's cheap meat. It's not cheap meat. My good friend Dr. John Eichert says we can no longer afford the cheap meat policy of this country. It's not cheap. They have brilliantly mastered the political system and have externalized the cost onto the backs of the taxpayers. Property damage. What about the neighbor's property values? I'm so tired, and I discussed this with my good Farm Bureau friends in Missouri, and they want property rights. Property. I ought to have a right on my property. I'm not suggesting your Farm Bureau. I'm talking about mine. This is a big issue that Tim and I deal with every day. Is this property rights issue? These nuisance laws. And I always say, what about mine? I own my property. 4 generations we've owned that farm. 1 year after my grandmother married my grandfather, she burned down the house, the farmhouse. She said it was by accident because she set the lantern too close to a curtain. I don't know, Grandma. That was her story. She stuck to it. Grandpa built her a new farm home. Hey, Grandpa. My dad was born in that home. My granddad died in that home. My dad died 10 feet from where he was born in that home. My brother lives in that home. And to be told that I don't have a right to that property is insanity in America. There are 2 rights that need to be preserved. The right of my neighbors and my right. And my dang neighbor better quit stomping on me. We have rights as well. Those of us that want to be good stewards of the land and the animal and of our neighbors. We care which way the wind blows, which way the water runs. We take that responsibility. School lunch program, when they overproduce, they don't have to worry because our Secretary of Agriculture will quickly swoop in and buy up all the excess to prop up the prices for an industrialized model that abuses us. They have loan guarantees. If you build a single-purpose barn or facility, single purpose like for chickens or for hogs or for dairies, You can get a loan guarantee from your U.S. government. Your tax money guarantees that money will be paid back to the bank. The bank has no risk. They get a 3-year or 4-year contract on a 15-year mortgage. And no one cares because you taxpayers are going to pay if it goes belly up, and you don't care. They don't care if there's only one person going to contract with them, and in the second contract the value goes down, the third contract it goes down to pretty soon they're farming for nothing. Loan guarantees. If I want to build a traditional barn multi-purpose type facility, there's no loan guarantee for me. My banker needs 45 to 50% equity. Why do you think farmers are... It's not the farmer's fault most of the time. Most of them are great human beings, even those with CAFOs. I stand with them. They are not given many options if they're going to preserve their family farm. The banker tells them, you want that operating loan again this year? You need to think about contracting with Mr. Cargill. I'll loan you the money. And they find themselves between a rock and a hard place. I don't agree with a lot of my Missouri farmers and their attitude of who they ought to be supporting in elected office, because it's the same dumb people that put them in that box. Predatory pricing under GIPSA. Look at the video as I talked about. They own our capitals, putting millions and millions of dollars into races to ensure their victories. The agri-industrial complex. These are their supporters. My checkoff dollars. I sell a calf, I pay in. I sell a pig, I pay in. These are the people that then turn around and do not support country of origin labeling. Worked adamantly to defeat it in the last farm bill. They stopped the GIPSA rules that would have protected Mr. Watts and other chicken farmers and hog farmers around the country. They want predatory marketing practices. The biggest villain of them all is our beef checkoff. Lobbying against the interest of the ranchers and farmers of America in the name of the Meat Institute. If you want to read a good book that was just published here about a year ago this month, The Meat Racket by Chris Leonard. In his book, he talks about since the year 2000, 141,000 cattle farmers were stomped out of business. 16 cents, the most an average farmer made from their dollar. 16,000 meat and poultry workers lost their jobs. As USDA said, we can just speed up the lines. At the same time, they saw fewer and fewer workers. 49% increase in the beef price. More of the retail price goes in the pockets of multinational corporations, and we see that profit leaving the rural economy, the states, and the U.S. economy. I'm going to run through kind of how we got here, and then try to frame this up in a couple things, because it's not hopeless. This very meeting is a sign that there is hope. By working together, not allowing the industrialized ag complex, this agribusiness complex that wants to use diversionary politics and distract us from the real enemy. This is not the first time this country has faced this. There was the trust busters. Maybe you remember your history. I'll give you a quick review. Sherman Act was passed in 1890 attempting to bust the trust, the whiskey trust, the meat trust, the Packer trust. Those trusts controlled everything in the country. Clayton Act was in 1914. That's our antitrust laws that said you couldn't have a monopoly. And then the Packers and Stockyard Act, which I referred to earlier, GIPSA, was passed in 1921. It has been worthless. The court said it wasn't definite enough in order for them to interpret it and enforce it. and so the predatory practices have been allowed in agriculture. Agriculture has its own antitrust laws over the food industry. So if you've got commodity animals or then the Packers and Stockyard Act is your antitrust law. We have lack of capital now that's sending us down the tubes. Farmers are forced to go with vertical integration agribusiness. 127 years ago, U.S. launched its first federal investigation of meat packing, the Big Four. Some of them are still around today, you might notice. At that time, the Big Four controlled 45% of U.S. slaughter. Today, it's over 50%, some as high as 80%, as you saw in my previous slides. 1888, citizens started to rattle their sabers. 1906, the great book, The Jungle. This is a quote from the book. Upton Sinclair wrote, "In the national capital, the Meatpacking Trust had power to prevent inspection of its product and to falsify government reports. In the commercial world, it," being the Meatpacking Trust, "wiped out thousands of businesses every year." Sound familiar? There are poultry plants in southern Missouri and Arkansas that were bought up by the largest poultry producer in that area, Mr. Tyson, and shut down, and just for the sole purpose of doing away with competition. (1890) was the Sherman Act, 1914 the Clayton Act. 1920, one of the best things that happened to the consumers and the farmers and the animals and the environment was a court issued the Big Four a consent decree. And they entered this consent decree and said that any contract, prohibited any contract in restraint of trade, owning an interest in any stockyard or any market journal, having an interest in manufacturing food products not related to meat packing. Meat packers could only slaughter and pack the meat, couldn't own the retail, couldn't own the animal. They could not vertically integrate. They stopped vertical integration in 1920. 1921, Packers and Stockyard Act passed. By 1977, packer concentration had hit an all-time low in the United States, at least has been recorded, to 20%. I was getting ready to farm. It was a bright future that I thought I had in agriculture, to be a good steward as my granddad and my dad taught me to be. (1981), the Reagan administration. I remember the day this happened. I'm driving an orange GMC pickup. Ugly as you can imagine, but it was the cheapest one on the lot. I was trying to start farming, and I had bought this pickup. I'm driving down I-70 to Columbia, Missouri, and the radio NPR equivalent reported this consent decree that Ronald Reagan, one of his first acts after becoming president, lifted the consent decree of 1921. He also pushed through, using attorneys and economists from the University of Chicago, a new definition in the Clayton Act for antitrust. No longer would it be anti-competition, it would be efficiency. By 1984 and 85, this country saw the largest number of acquisitions and mergers in the world. And Mitt Romney and the Harvard and Yale business schools were pumping out this thinking right and left. He was a graduate with this thought process. Became a king of these mergers. They reduced the budget of those that were to oversee the antitrust law. So not only did they get the change, they also ensured that what little was left of antitrust laws, there wasn't anybody. I am told that there actually were phones that would ring and no one would answer them. That's how much they depleted the staff. Then the Obama, just to keep it, I'm going to talk about Clinton in a minute, just to keep it bipartisan. We've been on a roll since 1981. No president has failed to support industrialized ag and vertical integration and the destruction of our rural economies, to the inhumane practices to our animals, the abuse to to our neighbors and to our environment. Obama started off to support GIPSA, and then the Congress actually passed a rider onto a funding bill and stopped all the rules and regulations. Most of us thought the Obama administration could have held fire longer. The Banking Act of 1994, my good friend Bill Clinton and Graham Leachy Bliley reverses Glass-Steagall. Tell you a little bit about that. You all know what the Glass-Steagall Act was? First and foremost, it was the last substantial foundation to the New Deal that was left in place by that time. All the New Deal by then was unwound. You recall under the New Deal, Roosevelt took the Big Four, even though they were stuck and they couldn't vertically integrate anymore after the 1921 court decision, took the Big Four and made them 80. The Reagan Act allowed the 80 to come back together. This is what then candidate Obama said of Clinton's Glass-Steagall Act support. Bill Clinton, according to the White House records, was on the phone with the president of Citicorp trying to get this passed, because Citicorp had already violated this act, the Glass-Steagall Act. It said that banks could not own everything. You couldn't be the insurance company, the broker. You couldn't do it all, right? You couldn't vertically integrate. Not any different than what the Packers were. You couldn't vertically integrate. The crash in the 30s was about too much concentration of financial decisions in a few houses. And so the New Deal spun that away and said, banks, you're going to have savings and loans. You remember how that failed. Savings and loans, you're going to have the banks, traditional financial, you're going to have insurance, and then they consolidated it. And by the time the Glass-Steagall Act was repealed in 1999, the $300 million lobbying effort that drove deregulation was more about facilitating mergers than creating an efficient regulatory framework. This is Mr. Obama, he said in Cooper Union. So now the efficiencies that were, the new definition of efficiency for antitrust that was put in place under the Reagan administration, it had done all that it could in acquisitions and mergers in 84 and 85, but it now needed the capital to do more. And repealing Glass-Steagall was what they needed to concentrate the capital in this country, in this world, into the hands of a few so they could finalize the plans of concentrating your food system. I've got slides. You notice you don't have any more community banks? Farmers used to depend on their community bank. The community bank knew the farmer, knew the community, helped small businesses grow. This is the reason you don't have them. There's a direct correlation. I've got a slide that just shows it perfectly of how when this comes in, how we lost our money and our wealth, our capital in our local communities and our states as it concentrated on Wall Street. Further driving farmers out of businesses, businesses off Main Street. Now listen, it's pretty bleak. It's hard to get much more than 80% concentration, right? The difference today than in when we won last time, we being the people. Remember we the people? Somewhere out there, there's a document. We the people. We have won before. It's not the first time we have found ourselves where wealth and abuse of power has exhibited itself so soundly and solidly in the halls of our capitals. A good friend of mine says that you can have whatever kind of food system you want, you just need the policies to support it. It's not by accident that we have arrived here. It was a planned march starting in about 1981 to ensure this is where we would find ourselves today under the banner of feeding the world. We don't feed the world. As a matter of fact, when we began the debate on the last farm bill, which from now on ought to be called the food bill, the last debate from 1980 to the last debate on the farm bill, on the grains, the major five that was reported in 1980, the U.S. had actually lost export. We were not feeding the world. We were feeding less of the world than before these policies went into effect in 1980. You add soybeans to that list, because in 1980 soybeans wasn't a primary monitored crop under the same parameters with that USDA reported. You add it, we had increased our exports by a little over 9%, but the world demand had grown over 19%. We had lost market share even when you add soybeans into the export figures. We're not feeding the world. We can't even feed ourselves. In the early 1900s, about 30% of the U.S. was made up of farmers. Today, it's less than 1%. How many farmers are in the room? Okay, congratulations. Thank you. We make up less than 1% of the population. There's not enough of us. The first solution is we in agriculture beat them back before. But today, if every one of us mounted our horses, pulled our sabers, and we charged the line, there's not enough of us to penetrate that line. We will lose. Matter of fact, if you haven't noticed, we are losing. We lost 1 million of us. So we, the people, have to find a way to get the critical mass to begin to work together, right? We all eat. I had a bumper sticker on my old truck, not the orange one, it's a red Chevy. I remember the day my brother and I put it on there. We were very proud, trying to find a way to sustain our family farm. And it says, if you eat, you're in agriculture. When I put it on there, it was all about me. I missed the whole point of it. The truth is, everybody that eats should have the right to have an opinion about where their food comes from. And I should not be, as a farmer, offended when they want to have a dialogue with me. Whether that's about being a good steward of the land or the animal or my neighbors or their economy or their town or their water bill prices. Everyone should have that right. And once we farmers can get into that mindset, then we can begin to build coalitions, not unlike the one Gail led the charge for and all of us joined. Then our 1% farmers begins to grow with those people that care about where their food comes from. You bring in the animal welfare, the environmentalists, the urban agriculture folks, the good food movement, your farmers markets, your organic producers. You begin to bring that together, and in Missouri, we built Missouri's Food for America. It was outspent 5-1. I understand the Michigan right to farm is different, but in Missouri, it's going to cause a plague to happen. We were outspent 5-1, but we, the people, stood up and only lost by 2,315 votes out of 1 million. We had Facebook posts hitting 100,000 views a day because people care. Richard Oswald, president of the Missouri Farmers Union, was the face of the campaign, a true American farmer, joining with the other organizations to say enough's enough. We stopped the bad right to farm initiative in Indiana. The state Senate voted no. We can win if we join together. Other examples, this was in the Blade. This is Ohio. John Dinan worked for HSUS as our outreach and engagement. The editorial had come out and failed to mention manure as a problem in Lake Erie. So we put on a campaign with our coalition partners. And just February the 4th, the Blade came out with their own editorial recognizing that animal waste and this concentration is a problem. Joining together with one voice that has the information necessary to deliver those comments into the public arena. Corporate reform. Talking to those who buy food. These are corporations that HSUS has worked with to provide better humane practices within their food chains, within their supply chains. Doing away with gestation crates. Those things that mamas are going to squash their piglets with. I got to get to the governor yet, but these are states that have taken up action. Again, I commend Michigan State Legislature for stepping up to the plate. People joining together with one voice, one common ground, moving legislators. Bill Heffernan, probably the leading expert on concentration, studied this whole area of how we got into this horrible place. The centralized food system that continues to emerge was never voted on by the people, or that matter, the people of the world. It is a product of a deliberate decisions made by very few powerful human actors. This is not the only system that could emerge. Is it not time to ask some critical questions about our food system and about what is in the best interest of this and future generations? Isn't it time to have this kind of conference to join together, put aside our differences? There's enough that we should join around and rally around, that when we mount our horses and we pull our sabers, we can penetrate that line. We will be heard because we are the people. It is our country. It is our right.
Let's take a few questions, and then we'll have from the audience, and then we'll have a break.
Is there any outreach that you're doing to global connections to work together? I mean, I think, yes, in the U.S. we need to combine our efforts, but we should do it globally too.
We've exported. We've lost our place in the market for exporting. We don't even get close to feeding the world. But what we did export was this whole model. As I mentioned in my opening, HSI, I just came from Brussels where I'm working with the EU commissioners on TTIP and trying not to dumb down standards that European community has already established for environment, animal welfare, food safety issues. We are working actively in India. We were able to put together small farmers, egg producers, and we were able to convince changes in all but one of the states of India to adopt better practices and working with those small farmers and providing environmentally sound and humane practices on their production of eggs. We are working in South Africa. We did build, along with other NGOs, not just HSI, we're proud to be part of the teams. We were able to put together small farmers, and the largest, I believe it's the largest, nearly the largest retailer is now moving small farm products that are more sustainable into those grocery stores. And so you're right to ask the question. And if you have an interest in that area, then you should join those. I would hope that you would also stay focused on the U.S. We're the ones that created this problem. There's something called Slow Meat. I'm an advisor to Slow Food USA and work with Slow Food International. Slow Meat's going to be held in June in Denver. You ought to think about coming. We will have international representation there as well as we try to build out plans for the U.S., but also listen to our global community. I spoke in Italy here in October, and you know, we farmers, we're a community of farmers. One quick story, NAFTA. I opposed NAFTA. NAFTA came along. There's a documentary on following two pig farmers from Mexico as they were driven off their land. They got down to where they turned off the electricity in their home to try to keep making their farm payments and lived by candle. Ultimately, they lost their family farms. You know what they did for a living? They went to work at Smithfield's pork plant in North Carolina, the very company that had put them out of business. Now, how sinful is that? We are a community of farmers, and we must understand we need to work globally. And I'm proud that we have HSI to do that. I'd be happy to talk to you more about that.
We talk about how the factory farm operations are not sustainable. I'm wondering if you could pick what you think is the weakest link in that chain. Is it phosphorus that they say is going to be gone in 2035, or besides consumers choosing differently and putting them out of business because we won't eat it anymore, aren't there different inputs that we're going to run out of if we continue the way we are?
Yeah, you mean not sustainable, that the agricultural model is not sustainable because of the inputs. You mentioned phosphorus. You know, there is a cartel controlling variety of different necessary minerals and ingredients in hog feed and other animal feeds. There's no doubt that it's a petroleum-based model, heavily petroleum-based and chemical-based. Ultimately, those are finite resources. I think the biggest resource that is going to cost them is the land and water. With climate change, I think we're going to see, that their model is just not sustainable as we see the issues around climate change and droughts. Now in Texas and the Panhandle area, the aquifer there is dropping drastically. So access to water is probably one of the biggest issues that they will face. One of the things we can do is take action, learn and understand their business model, and force them to internalize their cost. It's my fear that if we wait until they use up the resources, well, we have to have some of those resources even to do it the right way. And unless we begin to break them down in advance, this world is going to be a very, very bad place to live with the climate change.
Without subsidies and without antibiotics, the industrial livestock operations couldn't exist?
I didn't touch on antibiotics. Antibiotics is just a crutch so that they can place those animals in that confinement. The animal lives under such stress, their immune system breaks down, so they have to pump antibiotics into them their entire life to sustain them. Of course, we're going to get some big bug one of these days, and we may be the resource that's not available. There may not be anybody to raise the animals. We may all be gone. So it is true that for them to maintain the heavy concentration of animals, antibiotics is a big piece of it, and we should all work to support FDA and other changes to ensure that they cannot be used other than for therapeutic reasons. I think the other issue that I would add to your list is is this externalizing the cost of the environmental impact. Their model falls apart immediately if they have to bear the full cost. It's just not sustainable. Good farmers and good stewards can compete in the marketplace at the grocery store, retail, dollar for dollar, if they just had to internalize their cost. So I would add that, but yes.
I have a question in regards to pharmaceuticals. So they're involved in this whole scheme, which sounds naive of me. I didn't realize that. I didn't think about that. Do we have any data on that? Any percentages of their involvement in the antibiotic production?
Yes, there's lots of data in regards to pharma. One of the reasons they've been able to build, you only have so much time, so I didn't touch on that side of it, but it is a huge issue. One reason they've been able to build this industrialized complex and control Washington is it's not only the multinational agricultural interests, the Farm Bureau, and our checkoff dollars, it's also pharma. Over half of the antibiotics, there's a disagreement, but it's clearly over half of the antibiotics produced in the U.S. goes to animal feed. So they have a high interest in ensuring there's more animals raised in the U.S. And they have a very huge lobby in most every one of your capitals that I've worked in. Every one of them I've worked in, I bump into pharma. So it's an issue that needs to be understood and must be dealt with, as Gail had mentioned in one of hers. That would be, I'm on a panel this afternoon, but I'm around all day. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. I'll be at the break. We have a table. Jill and I will be at our table during those periods. But also go out and visit all the tables that are out in the exhibit area. There's a lot of great things going on in Michigan. Learn about it. Become part of the coalition. Together we win. Thank you very much.